Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to this session on aligning investors on impact management. I am Roshni Prakash, Knowledge Director at AVPN. I'm so excited to have you all with us today for this discussion, which is very important to so many in our community. This is day 5 of the AVPN virtual conference, so most of you know us well already, but for the benefit of new delegates who may not know about AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. I will be your MC, and my role is to ensure that you have a valuable experience in the next hour. If you find that the video is lagging or my voice is, it may be due to internet bandwidth issues. It may help to pause the video by hovering your mouse over the display. Before we kick off the session, I'd like to highlight a few features of this virtual room. To start, please make sure you are using the app version of Adobe Connect and not the browser version so that you have the best experience. Please keep your microphones and video cameras turned off throughout the session. If at any point you get disconnected or you have a bad connection, try to log out of the app and then log back in. If you're using the browser, refresh the page. Ensure that you're not running other programs in the background, and hopefully this will improve the situation. If you continue to face technical challenges, such as difficulties in hearing the speakers, please do not hesitate to reach out to us through the Q&A pod or use the link provided to reach the AVPN Tech Help Desk. We will address your query as soon as we can. Please note that this session is being recorded, and you will be able to access the recording from conference.avpn.asia within the next day. You would have seen the community chat box that I had asked everyone to use to introduce themselves. We advise you not to use this chat box to surface any technical questions, as that will disrupt the session flow. If you do have questions for your speakers in relation to this session, we will have time for Q&A, so do stay with us until the end. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A pod that you will see in subsequent screens. These will be conveyed to our speakers directly, and rest assured we will be monitoring all of your questions behind the scenes and will address as many as possible. There will be interactive activities during the session, and I would encourage you to participate in these. If you look at the bottom of the screen, we have also provided you with links to relevant resources that you can download or refer to. These resources are also available on the session page on the conference website. The AVPN connector is available to attendees from AVPN member organizations and paid ticket holders. This allows you to message and schedule one-to-one meetings with fellow collaborators. Please access it via the link in the SharePod. A quick 1-minute tutorial can also be found on the main conference site to ensure that you make full use of the networking opportunities available. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Kevin Teo, Chief Operating Officer at AVPN, who will set the stage for today's session and introduce our speakers. Kevin, please.
Thanks, Rosh, for the introduction. And a very warm welcome to everyone joining us on this important topic of impact management. At AVPN, we have run many training sessions and webinars on impact management, and this is certainly a hot topic for many of our members and stakeholders. As such, it is great to have with us today the following panelists. Olivia Prentice, Chief Operating Officer and Head of Content at the Impact Management Project. Lisa Glasgow, Manager at the Global Impact Investing Network, who heads up their IRIS Plus program. Robert Vodica, Vice President at Small Enterprise Assistance Fund, SEAF, which provides growth capital and assistance to SMEs in emerging and transition markets. Olivia, Lisa, and Robert are joining us today from the US, where it is late at night, so thank you all for taking the time. To get the ball rolling, we would like to get a sense for who's in the room and to understand what is everyone's understanding and level of practice around impact management. So we will start off with a short poll. We'd like to understand which aspects of impact management you might find challenging and to also understand how you would rate your level of practice around impact management today. And last but not least, your level of familiarity with IRIS+. Yeah, I can see the responses trickling in. And in terms of challenges, it would seem like collecting quality data seems to be what's plaguing several of our participants today, followed by selection of metrics. And it's great because we have Lisa today to talk about what IRIS+ is doing on this front. On level of practice, we have a few of you that are at the advanced level, but many at the basic level. And finally, as it relates to IRIS+, it's good to see a distribution of awareness around this at the intermediate level and also some basic awareness. Okay, let me just set the stage by doing a quick presentation on what we consider as the impact value chain. So the focus for today's discussion is on why it is important to align stakeholders and investors on impact management. And in fact, this is something that needs to happen at the ecosystem level. We will also cover what is currently being done by various organizations along these lines. As you can imagine, shaping the impact management practice at the ecosystem level is a monumental challenge. And so sometimes practitioners on the ground, this might come across as feeling somewhat abstract and disconnected. And that explains the choice of our panelists for today. To set some context for our presentation, let's start with what we refer to at AVPN as the impact value chain. If you're looking to deliver social impact, you are in essence trying to change outcomes for the stakeholders at the end of this value chain, what you see as the beneficiaries in this chart. Taking an example from the impact investing realm, we have asset owners, also known as limited partners, who put investments into impact funds, where you see the next bubble that shows up as general partners, which subsequently direct resources to enterprises. And they eventually interact with beneficiaries and deliver on the eventual social mission. When we run impact management workshops at AVPN, we often have participants asking us for the best impact management system to recommend. And you can imagine that this is a very tricky question to respond to. The truth is, what's best for an organization along the impact value chain might not be best for adjacent entities. And hence, you see a proliferation of frameworks in the market, making it difficult to compare performance and oftentimes reinventing the wheel. And yet, of course, we have oversimplified this view of the impact value chain. In reality, the social impact ecosystem looks like this. Several asset owners place investments into impact funds, which then make multiple investments across their portfolio to enterprises, and these enterprises touch multiple beneficiary groups. In this complex many-to-many configuration, it now does not make sense to optimize impact management efforts between one-to-one touchpoints. What makes sense for each entity in the ecosystem needs to also work well for many entities, and in fact for the whole ecosystem, so that we can streamline our impact management efforts, reduce or eliminate duplicate reporting, and provide more comprehensive comparability of impact management efforts. So where do we start with everyone in the impact management ecosystem asking the question of what is the best impact management system to use? Today, we have put together a whistle-stop tour into significant efforts to align this entire ecosystem on impact management. For our tour guides, we'll start with Olivia from the Impact Management Project, who will outline their efforts to drive convergence of the impact language across the sectors of grant makers, impact investors, asset owners, and international organizations. This will be followed by Lisa, who will dive into IRIS+, which seeks to align investors with a set of core and standardized metrics. And finally, a deeper dive by Robert, showing us how they've supplemented their impact reporting with IRIS Plus core metrics. At the end of this discussion, you should not leave with the impression that all this is a grand plan architected from the top down. At each level, there are stakeholder groups and communities engaging in these discussions. And if you don't already know about them or how to access them, this will be an invitation for you to find out more and to connect. And with that, hop on board and let's start with Olivia from IMP. Olivia, over to you, please.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kevin, and that great point you make about how all of this is based on groups of people around the world sharing their experience. And that's really at the heart of the IMP. So good morning, everybody. My name is Olivia Prentice. As Kevin said, I'm COO and Head of Content at the IMP. It's so exciting to be joining all of you this evening from New York. And thank you so much to ABPN for hosting this great event. So as a brief introduction, the IMP is a consensus building forum launched in 2016, which brought together over 2,000 practitioners from across the world and across the value chain that Kevin just showed to agree on the data needed to understand social, environmental, and economic impacts on people and the planet. The IMP is a public good initiative funded by the organizations you see listed on this slide here. Today, I'm going to talk about the emerging consensus on measuring and managing impact from an investor perspective and share some rules of thumb around assessing impact performance to guide decision-making. The IMP has three parts to its strategy, which I'm going to outline quickly now because it's not an obvious organizational structure. In the top section there, we identify that we continue to build consensus with a practitioner community of 2,000 organizations, except that we now do this through an online hub called Managing Impact on the Harvard Business Review Idea Lab platform. You just need to Google Managing Impact and it's open to anyone to join. We also facilitate a collaboration of 13 organizations who are coordinating their standards to make impact measurement and management practice easier and more joined up. And Lissa, who will talk later, is part of IRIS Plus, who is one of these organizations. And then finally, we incubate an initiative called Impact Frontiers. This helps investors to develop a framework to assess their financial and impact performance in an integrated way and optimize them both. This enables investors not only to create best practices for themselves, but also encourages them to share the lessons learned in cohorts with their peers and around the world. So please do look up Impact Frontiers if you're interested in that work. I also wanted to take a moment just today to spotlight and thank just a few of the Asia-based organizations that have and continue to contribute to the IMP. Thank you so much for all of your input, and I really hope that after this, we'll see many, many more logos on that slide in future. So first, why is impact management important? The impact management project was set up to focus on the management piece, as is given in the name. This means focusing on how information is actually used to improve the lives of people and the quality of the planet. So how impact data is used for management decision-making. We spent a lot of time defining the word impact through the project to help us figure out how to measure it. So I'm going to define a few of these concepts up front and then bring them to life a bit later on. Impact is a change in outcome caused by an organization where an outcome is an aspect of social or environmental well-being. It is only by understanding that change in outcome, or the impact, relative to social or ecological thresholds that impact performance can be understood as good or bad, positive or negative, which guides us to make decisions to improve the bad and maybe make better, even better, the good. So for example, by looking at changes in a wage level relative to a living wage, helps the users of that information judge whether they're having a positive or negative outcome for their employees. This is what impact management is, using information in context to drive decision-making. So I'm going to bring these concepts to life a little bit further using what we call the IMP's 5 dimensions. If you're not familiar with the 5 dimensions, please do look these up on our website. as I'm not going to go into them in detail here. But their 5 dimensions effectively break down the definition I just described of impact, that it's a change in outcome. So first, you need to measure the outcome relative to a threshold, like I mentioned, and understand whether this outcome is important to those experiencing it. Here is the example of access to interrupted power by 24 hours of power is a threshold for a positive outcome. You can see we've used an IRIS Plus metric here. You then need to look at what change in outcome has happened due to the organization. So you need data on the baseline level of outcome, the number of people affected, the duration of the outcome, and the local benchmark or counterfactual. That latter piece of information helps you understand whether that outcome would have happened without that organization, and therefore whether net new outcomes are occurring. And then it's helpful to consider the impact risk taken. What is the likelihood that this impact did or will not occur as expected based on the information above? For example, did unexpected negative impacts occur? Have a look at the IMP website for a list of types of impact risk if this is a new concept to you. So as you can see by those rows highlighted in pink now on the slide, the outcome measure is at the heart of measurement. You use the same metric in 4 different ways across the 5 dimensions. So let's briefly talk about what an outcome measure is. An outcome is the result of an action that is an aspect of well-being, but outcomes can be measured at any point on that path towards well-being. Here I've used the SDGs to illustrate that aspect of well-being which the world has identified as being important. So on the left-hand side, here are some indicators where you might just put a policy in place or measure activities that an organization is carrying out. You might go one step further and measure what has happened as a result of those activities that are still in control of the organization and output. But to really measure an outcome, you go through to the change in well-being. So this diagram also illustrates what is typically thought of as ESG measures. These are still measures which are proxies for outcome, like that third row of work-related injuries. Often ESG factors are a subset of outcomes that matter to people and planet, but which are also financial material to a business. So once we have the data, we can choose what we do with it based on our goals. So following this diagram left to right, I really hope it's big enough on your screen to see it. You can also find this diagram on our website. So most of the capital markets are aware that their company or portfolio is doing harm, but choose not to act. Moving one step in, some organizations and their investors choose to act to avoid harm. Maybe because their intention is to mitigate risk, maybe because they believe it's the right thing to do ethically. But to know if they've achieved that, the assessment they need to see is that negative outcomes are improving. Some people want to go further than that and ensure they're benefiting stakeholders by delivering positive outcomes, perhaps because they believe that sustainability drives long-term value. And some want to go even further to contributing to solutions. This means having a positive outcome for stakeholders who are previously experiencing something negative. And therefore, they would be contributing to a global goal like reducing poverty or delivering healthcare to those with previous lack of access. This way, every impact, and therefore every organization, can actually be classified as an A, B, or C company. Please note that the boxes in this diagram are overlapping, which means you have to be at least avoiding harm to most of your stakeholders if you are contributing to a solution for one or two. I encourage you to have a think now about the type of impact you're targeting, or maybe you're having in your company or your portfolio, as we'll be asking you to feedback later. So how do you assess whether you're having negative or positive outcomes? And perhaps even contributing to a solution. I want to talk for a little bit about the thresholds, the use of thresholds to make that assessment. Here's an example of assessing whether an organization is actually acting to avoid harm, that first box. The threshold for a positive outcome with regard to adulterated food is 0 instances of food poisoning. The company here has reduced harm by moving from 7 cases to 2 in the period. Here's an example of assessing whether an organization is benefiting stakeholders, where the outcome is a healthy weight measured by body mass index. The threshold for a positive outcome has been defined by science as the range between 18.5 and 24.9 BMI. So if an organization is helping people maintain a healthy weight above that threshold, it is a positive outcome, and the stakeholder is receiving a benefit. And finally, here's an example of assessing whether an organization is contributing to solutions. Using that same outcome of BMI, you can see that if an adult is below that threshold, they are underserved with regard to a healthy weight, and they are malnourished, and therefore the outcome is negative. If an organization is helping people previously below that threshold meet that threshold for a positive outcome, that means that they are contributing to solutions. So hopefully that has given you a sense of how to really use data you might collect to assess whether you're having a positive impact or not. But of course, what I've discussed so far, that A, B, and C type of impact, that happens at the company level. The investors themselves can choose certain actions that enable them to contribute to that impact at the company level. Again, this hopefully isn't too small on your screen, but there's more information on our website of the 4 different actions or strategies investors can employ in combination to contribute to the impact of their portfolio. They can signal to the market that measuring impact matters. They can engage actively to improve impact by sharing expertise or taking a board seat or just voting. They can take on a perception of disproportionate risk to grow a new market, or they can provide flexible or concessionary capital. And as I mentioned, you can of course do these in combination. And so it's therefore possible to pull the ABC and these investor contribution strategies together to give you the universe of what we call impact classes available to investors. Akin to asset classes, these grouping of investments with similar characteristics help investors articulate the type of impact that they want to have in their portfolio, or from an asset owner perspective, manage the different products in their portfolio across a diverse degree of impact to balance their own financial risk and return thresholds. Real investment products have been classified here to give you a sense of the type of product that you can see in each impact class. And please note that any product above the bottom 2 rows is a market rate product. This is important because it dispels the myth that you cannot have impact and good commercial returns. So finally, I wanted to mention that all of that you've seen so far, that has been built as consensus with a number of organizations globally, and it continues to be stress tested around the world. We would really love feedback about any of this work that's on our website, and please do sign up to our newsletter where we share information about events and webinars that encourages greater practitioner input. But I did want to finally just end by mentioning that the IMP is now focused, instead of consensus building with practitioners largely, now we are working with these 13 standard setting organizations listed here to help ensure that as you navigate measuring and managing your impact across that spectrum of types of impact, you can easily find joined up standards to help you implement your practices. It is not widely realized that many public good standards exist to help organizations and investors put in place processes, choose metrics, and benchmark their performance. And there are many more in development. As I say, please do sign up to our newsletter to hear about some of this work and find out how you can get involved. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Olivia. I would like to invite everyone to please answer the questions that you see on your screen now. And Olivia, as our participants are responding to the poll questions, you've mentioned 4 ways in which an investor can contribute to impact performance. I was just wondering which among the 4 do you see as being most effective, and how does the size of the investor or the enterprise factor into that?
That's such an interesting question, Kevin. I think it really depends on the type of impact that you're trying to have. And it is actually a hotly debated topic amongst the investor community as to which strategies are most effective in which asset classes. For example, private equity, people would say that engaging actively and trying to grow a new market is a really effective way of helping smaller businesses perhaps develop their impact management practices where their resources might be scarce. So yeah, there is definitely an element of sizes of company. That's not to say that, of course, if you have big influence as a large public markets investor on a very large company, that can't be a really impactful thing. So I think it's a debate that continues to rage, and it's one that we've had through the Harvard Business Review platform that I mentioned. So if folks are interested in that topic, please do get involved.
Thanks, Olivia. And thanks to everyone for responding to the poll questions. It's great to see a large majority of you who are keen to act to avoid harm and to contribute to solutions. And on the different strategies that you've been using as investors, that the bulk are still at the signaling that measurable impact matters, while others are looking to engage more deeply, as you suggested, Olivia, in terms of deeper investor impact. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. I would now like to invite our next speakers, Lisa Glasgow, Manager of GIN's Iris Plus and Impact Management Program, and Robert Bodica, Vice President at CEIF, to take us through their presentation. Lisa, we'll start with you.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay? I think so. Okay.
Yep, up here.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thanks in particular to the AVPN team. I have to say how incredible all of the work that you've done in pulling together such an engaging and vibrant conversation these past couple of days, and very honored to be a part of that conversation. What I will aim to do in my section here is to take it from where Olivia has left off. I think she's brilliantly laid out how different actors might have different motivators in joining this conversation. And what I'll try to do is land that a little bit more tactically in terms of how Iris Plus helps users measure and manage their impact. Many of you are familiar with the Global Impact Investing Network, my organization. We're also known as the GIN. For those of you that are new to us, we are the global champion of impact investing. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to scaling both the size and the effectiveness of impact investing and the impact investing ecosystem more broadly. We have a number of different project areas. Some of you are members on the line, and we work closely with AVPN and some of the efforts there. We have a research arm, which just today actually launched the 10th annual Impact Investor Survey, which gives details on what impact investors are doing and how they're approaching their work within this space. And then we also recently launched the R3 Coalition, which is an effort in partnership with 13 different membership organizations, among whom AVPN is one, which is really aiming to bring investors together to respond to the COVID crisis. My work, however, is focused on that effectiveness piece in our mission statement. So helping impact investors improve how effective their investments are, and more broadly, helping other actors within the space, including consultants and enterprises and all sorts of different folks, engage more deeply and be able to access resources that can be useful to them. I will move forward and talk a little bit about Iris and the history here. This will be a little bit of a refresher for some. Iris Plus was developed a little over 10 years ago, and it was designed to be a place for the impact community to be able to find a common language for impact, identifying that it was going to be important in the development of this space for investors and companies to be able to compare apples to apples, and perhaps within that to compare red apples to red apples and green apples to green apples. We did this initially by bringing together a number of existing metrics, frameworks, and standards. Our goal at all times is to not reinvent the wheel and rather help coordinate those efforts that are already out there in terms of metrics and indicators. And so what we do is, or what we did in IRIS 1.0 in 2009 was to bring together 10 existing standards and just kind of help them weave together to facilitate complementarity through those conversations and through those measurements. That went well, and over the course of 4 major upgrades, taking us to 2016, we did the same. So we brought in more and more frameworks, ultimately reflecting a little over 50 within the system. And as a part of that process, we brought together those different metrics and allowed for things like footnotes to write in assumptions or usage guidance to help guide exactly how to collect those data points. And that takes us to 2016, of course, where at which point we started hearing from the industry that while IRIS was serving its goal quite well, it at this point was used by about 62% of the impact investing industry, so majority of folks, and had at that point reached 559 metrics. It was quite broad in its scope. It was not actually helping people figure out exactly which metrics were the right ones for them. And it also wasn't helping them find guidance and resources and tools that could be most useful to them. And so we started thinking about that. And we ultimately started speaking to people about it as well. So you see here a couple of the people that we spoke to. I would note that during this time we were speaking to asset owners and asset managers, but we were also putting particular emphasis in speaking with companies and research organizations, academics, incubators, a number of folks within the space who came to the conversation about measurement from different perspectives. It is a little bit difficult to fit 1,000 logos on a slide, so just a couple here. The full list is, of course, on our website. And so after speaking to all of them and really trying to understand what the needs were, kind of holistically and also for individual actors, we launched IRIS Plus almost exactly a year ago. And IRIS Plus takes those pain points that we were hearing and builds out the system to meet those needs. So within the system, on top of that foundation of the metrics that have been around for 10 years in IRIS, it adds an evidence base. It brings in practical insights and guidance on how to do specific things within IRIS, within impact measurement and management. It helps connect to best-in-class tools, and it also offers recommended core metric sets, which are based on deep engagement with the industry on particular topics, and in complementarity with all of those existing frameworks that were pulled into the system. Here are a couple of examples of those standards and frameworks. You'll see here that in addition to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, we have aligned IRIS Plus with the Impact Management Project's 5 dimensions. So what Olivia just walked through has been incredibly important for us in driving this conversation within the system. We're also aligned to frameworks like GRI and the 2X Challenge and others. Full list again on our website, along with tactical details. This is IRIS Plus. I won't sit here for too long, but just to show you a picture. Within IRIS Plus, as I've mentioned, there are a couple of key features. So these core metric sets are offered as recommendations on how certain actors and folks with particular goals can start thinking about their impact within this space, or rather measuring it. And it's not to say that these are comprehensive, and it's also not to say that the standard set can be applied in every context. I think what we've all heard and resonates quite deeply with us is that while there are probably similar questions that you want to ask within a certain topic, no standard set is going to be perfect for every context. So the system actually allows you to create a core metric set and then to customize within it for your particular needs. It also connects to an evidence base, which can inform theory of change and the way that we approach different investments and different efforts. And then finally, practical guidance, which can include things like some of our most recent pieces here, which are using IRIS Plus for data collection, using IRIS Plus for investment decision making, and using IRIS Plus for impact due diligence. I will skim over this in the interest of time, but within each one of these core metric sets, a couple of indicators are highlighted. And within each of those, of course, it spells out why this is an important piece of information, what data points you need to be able to calculate it, and then exactly how to go about that calculation in a step-by-step and really clear format. I will let Robert dive a little bit more deeply into a user perspective on how IRIS Plus can be applied. And we'll just highlight here that what we have heard from a number of different users is that it's useful for them across the investment cycle in a number of different ways, and can also be helpful in just guiding a conversation in a deeper exploration of impact goals. Here I would highlight that IRIS Plus in its current form has been live for about 1 year, launched in May 2019. Since then, we've been truly amazed at the uptake across the industry and across the world. We've had 80,000 over that unique visits to the site, and we have about 10,000 active users representing all continents and all different corners of the industry and all different focus areas, as you can see on the right there. I will wrap up by just mentioning that IRIS Plus, like a lot of the GINS work, is built on deep engagement within the industry. And again, asset owners, asset managers, companies, incubators, researchers, all sorts of different folks have been really instrumental in guiding the development of this system. To do that with respect to IRIS Plus, there are a couple of entry points, and I mention these because there will be a survey at the end of this session. And if you are interested in diving deeper into these conversations, we would love to welcome you in, and I would be happy to connect on that. Two main ways of doing that. One is joining the IRIS Plus working group, which is a larger learning and discussion group, which helps guide both the development of the IRIS Plus system, what functionalities will be helpful, what is useful and what is challenging within the system currently. So that's one. And then the other way of engaging is diving more deeply on a particular impact theme. We have 2 current discussions happening on this level. There's quality jobs and climate change mitigation. And 3 upcoming are on sustainable agriculture, clean energy, and racial equity, and more to come in the future as well. I was going to, at this point, highlight how Nuveen, which is the asset management arm of TIAA-CREF, uses IRIS Plus throughout their practice. You can see a couple of bullet points there. In the interest of time, I will chat the links to these, to both a webinar explaining it and the recently published document that walks through it a little bit more in depth. And with that, I will pass it over to Rob.
All right. Thank you, Lissa, for the introduction. Again, my name is Robert Gorica, and I'm a Vice President and Head of Impact at SEEP. And in this presentation, I'm going to give you a brief overview of SEEP, our impact program and operations, and how we've utilized IRIS Plus throughout our work, and hopefully give you some insights on how you can structure the impact work you are doing with IRIS Plus. So for more than 30 years, SEEP has been an active impact investor. We've got a focus on emerging and frontier markets and have made more than 425 investments across 40 funds in over 30 countries. And the mission of SEEP is to improve lives and communities in underserved markets through entrepreneur-focused investment. And we seek to do that through investing in and developing small and medium-sized enterprises through private equity and private debt investments. So creating financial and social impact is central to this work. And while company and fund level financial and operational metrics are common, impact metrics are more or less unique to our industry. And that's why we've been using IRIS since their launch and have turned to the IRIS Plus framework, both of which are becoming the industry standard for impact metrics and guidance. So how does SEEP achieve impact? Well, SEEP's primary focus, again, is in launching and managing private equity funds in emerging and frontier markets and investing in local SMEs. So we provide value-added technical assistance to our companies to improve their performance, formalize their operations, and importantly, we enhance the social and environmental aspects of their business models. And we've also launched 14 seed centers, which are entrepreneurial hubs that provide training and networking opportunities to early-stage SMEs. Through all of our investments, SEEP captures impact metrics that are used to help us guide our companies towards impact creation. Now, our metrics are sourced through the IRIS Plus system, which for us is beneficial as it allows for uniformity amongst a diverse set of companies, yet gives some specificity on a company-by-company basis, as we are largely sector agnostic, and aligns with the greater impact space. So we are, as was noted, kind of red apples to red apples, green apples to green apples with our peers. Now at SEEP, we classify our metrics into 3 groups, all of which again are IRIS aligned. First, our core metrics, which we seek to achieve 3 times growth over the course of the investment. And these are quality jobs, sales revenue, and taxes paid. Secondaries are supplementary metrics, which dig a little bit deeper into the makeup of the company and its operations. For us, these include gender lens metrics, which I'll touch on next, supplier and customer info, and governance, among others. And finally, we look at metrics that are unique to each company based on their specific sectors. For instance, this might be an agribusiness company, clean tech, education, or healthcare. Again, these metrics are all sourced and aligned through IRIS Plus, with the numbers captured pre-investment and then annually post-investment, and are used as the basis for ongoing portfolio company work. So an example of how we've used IRIS Plus to develop impact metrics for our companies is through our work in Organica. Now, SEEP invested in Organica in 2018 as part of its Southeast Asian-focused SEEP Women's Opportunity Fund. And Organica was founded in 2011 by a young mother who, upon recognizing the inadequacies in Vietnam's conventional food system, sought to provide the public with clean, safe, and healthy food. Organica established the country's first organic farm, avoiding the use of harmful and toxic chemicals, and has received international organic certifications, and has since expanded its footprint to enrich the options of local consumers. Now on the screen, I've got a snapshot of the Organica investment memo. And in addition to the core metrics mentioned on the prior page, we also seek additional metrics which are unique to the company investment thesis. And as this was part of SWAP, a gender lens fund, gender metrics are essential to not only the impact potential of this company, but also to the fund and SEEP's Women's Economic Empowerment Program. So in determining the proper metrics, our team used IRIS Plus to find relative thematic metrics. In addition to gender, which you can see is linked here between our investment memo and the IRIS Plus system, we also use the agribusiness screen to assemble a metric set for agribusiness, and together this will guide us through the life of the investment through data collection, assessment, analysis, and forecasting. Now, again, we're using IRIS Plus because it's easy to understand and use. It's a very straightforward portal that allows us to kind of come in, look at the themes we're targeting here, and find the appropriate metrics in an easy manner. And importantly, it provides guidance on how to find and employ the metrics, whether it's incorporating stakeholder voices in our investment, conducting impact due diligence, data collection. Again, it's very important as you diversify out among sectors, as we're sector agnostic. Given the time here, I'll touch on the last, another example, which was in the development of our gender equality scorecard, which is very built upon and integrated with IRIS+. So, as a way of context, CEIF developed the gender equality scorecard as a tool to assess the gender performance of our companies and their impact on improving women's economic empowerment. This is a key theme for CEIF, particularly in our Asian funds. And throughout the investment process, CEIF uses GES to assess, score, and select potential investments with 6 gender equality vectors built on 4 metrics each, which gives us 24 metrics within the scorecard. And the tool allows the user to assess a company's gender equality performance at a macro level. CEIF recognized the importance of harmonizing impact measurement and management approaches as it allows for a wider stakeholder engagement and adoption. So we aligned the 24 GES parameters with IRIS+. And the configuration of the IRIS database allowed for a simple exercise in reviewing the specific metrics and determining those to use in the GES, as well as using some of the research and evidence-based information available from IRIS+. And we think that the alignment with this industry standard is going to help us enable the global investment community to better measure the impact of the investments, and we thought that IRIS+ has been a key part of our work. So appreciate you guys listening to this presentation, and I look forward to continuing conversations.
Thanks for sharing, Lisa and Robert. Can I now invite both Lisa and Olivia to join us on this discussion panel, please? All right. And thanks to the audience as well for sending in your questions throughout our presentations. I've been very busily categorizing them and trying to make sense of coherent patterns to pose to our panelists. I think there was a cluster of questions around the pros and cons of alignment and standardization. Right? The pros, I guess, being around comparability, but the cons, one-sided was the loss of qualitative and deep data at the beneficiary level. So perhaps let's start with Robert first on your thoughts around this, and then Olivia sort of at the highest level, and then Lisa. Okay, Robert, can you start, please?
Sure. I mean, at CEIF, we've made more than 400 investments, and again, they're sector agnostic. So the way that we look at it is we need a set of investment impact metrics that can be used across all of these different sectors, but as well, when we have certain sectors such as agribusiness or healthcare or general lens, we need something that, a quick reference set that we can pull upon to quickly deploy metrics, find out which are the best ones that will allow us to choose the impact and the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve, and use those not only for ours, but then that we can compare to industry peers. So I think a unified database is very important.
Olivia, your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you. It's funny, we actually really recently ran a discussion on this amongst our community, and the community felt it was really important to split out the different types of standards in order to have a conversation around what can be standardized and what can't. So, for example, there has been a lot of work recently by a number of organizations such as the UNDP, UNDC, and the IFC on principles for good practice. And I think there is a lot of coalescence in the market around the types of processes that investors could put in place. It looks like good practice. So I think that can definitely be standardized, the same at the enterprise level. I think it's a little bit harder to standardize some of those thresholds I mentioned earlier. There isn't quite enough data yet on what constitutes good practice or good outcomes at every different outcome in every geography around the world. It would be a lot easier if there was. And similarly, there's a lot of work going on in impact evaluation at the moment. So how do we understand the total impact of something to compare? Perhaps through monetary coefficients. And again, that's an area where it's harder to standardize. Metrics is something that I think Iris Plus has shown that you can do, but there are probably emerging areas where more and more standardization can come.
And Lisa, your view from the investor network?
Yeah, I would agree, I think, entirely. I think that, as Olivia's laid out, there are a couple of different types of standards and approaches. So I'll speak specifically to metrics because that's what's most comfortable to me as part of Iris Plus. What we have found in developing out the different themes that are currently available is that there are commonalities amongst approaches within a particular theme that would allow for standardization of some of those questions. What we've also learned, though, is that there must be at all times some level of flexibility and concept specificity. We worked pretty hard within Iris Plus to allow for that building within the core metric set, but I think it's a great point, and that there really is a fine balance between what metrics should be standard and which ones should be really built according to the project.
We also had a cluster of questions around who pays for impact management and what kind of support can or should be provided to enterprises who need to perform this. And also, how do you connect what the enterprises need in terms of capturing accurate, sort of reality-based data from beneficiaries to what investors are looking for? So can we go the other way? So Lisa, start first, and then Olivia, and then Robert.
Sure. I'll dive into the latter part of the question. In thinking about needs of in terms of data for these companies and enterprises, I think that is where the information starts with the target stakeholders, and it's the enterprises or the companies that are then going to collect that data often and send it to investors. And so I think it's important to recognize that that is how data is and should flow, which means that investors need to be careful about asking good questions and questions that are additive to the companies and to those targets. There's, I guess, one thing that we've thought about quite a bit within Iris Plus is that as we have worked with these many different stakeholders, think about what metrics might be relevant for these. One of the things we often hear is that if investors working in that particular space and with that goal can get a little bit closer together in terms of what they're thinking, that might help to lighten the load for these data collection efforts and through companies and enterprises.
Thanks. And Olivia, your views on this?
Yeah, I would just say not a lot to add to what Lisa has said, other than I think it is a problem. There will always be a problem until the cost of collecting quality data is priced in to the investment. And I think we are getting to a point where that is expected, but I don't think we've got far enough yet. I think if investors are increasingly asking for this data, they need to be thinking about resourcing companies to do so. And so I think that the enterprise should be turning around and putting that pressure on investors.
Yeah. So Robert, is the cost of data collection and impact management priced into your investment?
I mean, it's certainly a shared cost between all parties at this point for us. We don't charge any extra for being an impact investor. So it's implicit from the investors in the seed fund that we are going to do our work as an impact investor to properly structure the fund, structure the deals, collect the information, and actively manage the investments to achieve the impact we're seeking. Likewise, downstream with the enterprises that we're investing in and developing, unless there's a technical assistance component to the fund, a lot of what we're asking them to do would need to come from their resources. So, part of it will come from the investment we make, but it is, it's their responsibility to accept the investment capital with the understanding that we are looking for intentional impact, and that they need to do their part. So, it's part of the work we're doing, but of course, there's always we always welcome additional resources if anybody wants to help out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this especially makes sense to what Lisa shared earlier on, in terms of how the different investor groups come together in your Navigating Impact program to discuss approaches around addressing the reporting needs for various themes. Lisa, just wondering along those lines, and with the interest of trying to streamline the language and efficiency in this process, are you finding your stakeholder groups within each of those themes sort of doing more co-investments and aligning their activities?
Through the process of the Navigating Impact project?
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of visibility into that necessarily. The development of the themes, the deep engagement part is about 6 months, which is quite quick to be assessing co-investment, etc. There is a longer engagement phase with the broader public through public comment periods and testing. And so I think it's entirely possible. I just don't have as much visibility into that. More about the language and the questions that we're asking as part of the impact.
I see. And I think that sounds like an opportunity that we can all work collectively together in terms of engaging these groups on what they have discovered when they go out into the field and look for investments, and whether the alignment of the language is making it more efficient among them as well as for their investees. And back to what I shared at the start of this whole discussion, hopefully the ecosystem benefits as a result. I think we're fast closing on our time for the session, so we'd love to hear from each of you on what forms of engagement you might be looking for from the community, and how can people best connect with you to take those forward. So let's start with Olivia, then Lisa, then Robert.
Sure, thank you so much. I would just encourage anybody that wants to know more about the INP or the work of all of the standards to subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find through the website link. And as I mentioned in my presentation, also to find the Harvard Business Review Idea Lab Managing Impact platform. If you have any trouble finding any of that, please just email team@impactmanagementproject.com. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Lisa?
I think there are a number of different ways that we would love to see engagement. The two that I highlighted in our in the presentation a moment ago was joining the IRIS Plus working group, which is a learning and discussion group that also helps guide the way that IRIS Plus develops and what challenges are still surfacing for folks within the space. The other is to dive into more specific topic areas for impact themes. The ones that we have currently live are quality jobs and climate change mitigation. And we're also building out the groups for sustainable agriculture, clean energy, and racial equity. So if you're interested in any of those, you can either let us know in the follow-up survey or go to iris.bin.org/collaborate.
Okay, and Robert?
Great. Yeah, we are active in SME investing and development within Asia and the globe. So if you're interested in learning more about impact investing, whether it's actually investing in the fund, or if you're an entrepreneur that's looking for investment capital, I mean, please reach out. Our website is seaf.com, SEAF. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can sign up for the newsletter, and we look forward to connecting.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to our participants for a lot of their questions. Some are very detailed. We will compile this and share with the speakers. Some of them go to specific points that each of you have shared during your presentation. So I think it might warrant a longer response, and we will endeavor to make that happen. On the AVPN side, we have valued our partnership with IMP as a strategic partner in pushing this movement forward across the ecosystem, working closely with Jin around various efforts, including IRIS Plus, And of course, with Steve as an AVPN member, we've been promoting a lot of what your philosophies are around sharing standards and doing more learning within the ecosystem. So thanks again to all of you as panelists, and thanks to our participants for their lively engagement. Roche, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. We have now come to the end of this session on aligning investors on impact management. Thank you again to our moderator, Kevin Teo, and speakers Olivia Prentice, Lisa Glasgow, and Robert Vodica for this excellent session. I'd also like to thank all the close to 500 delegates listening in for your active participation. This session was made possible with the kind support of our lead partners, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and the Edan Prize Foundation, as well as our knowledge partner, Standard Chartered Private Bank. The session was recorded, and the recording will be posted on the conference website soon. Please look out for it there. To continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates, please make full use of the AVPN connector. The link may be found in the link sharing pod. You will be able to see who logged on through the session page on the conference website. Do share highlights of this session on social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN2020. Please do visit the AVPN Hub on the conference site, which showcases various AVPN platforms for collaboration and networking. We would also invite you to explore our new prototype online learning platform, the AVPN Academy, at academy.avpn.asia. We would love to hear your feedback on how we can make this platform more useful in your learning journey. We'd also be happy to explore collaboration opportunities to create new courses and content for the AVPN community. The conference is continuing right now, 11 a.m. Singapore time, with a session on investing trends in South Asia post-COVID-19. But before you leave the room today, please share with us your feedback and key takeaways from the last hour. You may enter your responses directly on the screen. Thank you, and see you at the next session.